Hello everybody, this is Tim Durfee for Virtually Trivial, and today we're going to go over how to deploy our load balancers. The load balancers are going to, and I'm going to use air quotes here, balance the load between the PSCs, and I'll get in more depth on that in a little bit. But basically, you have a load balancer or a pair of load balancers in an HA cluster. Just depends on how you want to deploy it. And then they balance the load between two PSCs in the same site or more PSCs in the same site, whatever your organization has. Then when vCenter comes along, it's going to connect to the load balancer, and then the load balancer forwards the traffic onto the PSC. So up front, we need a couple of items. We need an IP address for the management IP. This is the IP address that you'll go to for the web page that we use to configure the load balancer. And in this case, we're going to be using the Citrix NetScaler VPX. It looks like they renamed it to the ADC. Quite honestly, I'm just going to refer to it as VPX. It's what I've known for years. So we need that management IP to manage the device. We need something called a subnet IP. So this is going to be an IP that is used to talk to the backend servers. So we'll have to enter that. And then we'll need a VIP. The VIP also needs a DNS entry. It needs a fully qualified domain name, and it needs the forward and reverse lookup for that IP. That's important. Once you have that, and all of these actually can go on the same subnet. There's no reason you have to split these up at all. It just makes it much easier if they're on the same subnet. You don't have to do any funkiness. So in my environment, I have a couple PSCs in this cluster. These two PSCs are in a site. And then I have two more PSCs down here. They're also in their own site, different from these, but all four are in the same SSO domain. I do have one VPX NetScaler deployed. He's fully configured, and he is balancing, again, loosely, the load between these two PSCs. So what we're going to be doing is deploying the VPX or the NetScaler for these two PSCs. The first thing you need to do is get to Citrix's website and download the Citrix NetScaler VPX or ADC. It'll come in a zip file, and then you basically extract the zip file and you have your files for ESX. There are also files there for things like Hyper-V, some other options that you can have. Just make sure you get the one for ESX. And I think they actually call it ESX too instead of ESXi. So the first thing that we need to do is we actually needed to get this appliance deployed into our VMware infrastructure. So I'm going to right click on the cluster and just deploy OVF template. I'm going to do a browse here, and in here we want to select all three files. Yep, all three files are selected. I just like to make sure real quick, and we'll click next. Let's make this something that is not quite obnoxious there. And we're in the second cluster here. I'm just going to pick a host. Sometimes this validating can take a couple minutes, so I'll probably just cut this out when I edit the video. All right, this is our review of the disk requirements. And our data store should show up here. I'm going to put it on this one. Make sure your port group is selected properly. In this case, I'm not very good with original name, so I just named it VLAN 4. It's tagged at the VLAN tag is 4. So, and just some summary information. We're going to click finish, and now it's going to deploy the OVF just like it would on any other OVF or OVA deploy. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video. I speed up the video as opposed to cutting it because I want you to see what transpires through the whole process. All right, the OVF is deployed. The appliance is sitting right here. Power him on. I'm going to get to the console here real quick. So this is going to take a few minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. Again, I'm going to speed up the video, but leave it so you can actually see what's happening. All right, we're all booted up. One thing I do want to mention here is that VMware only supports 3 load balancers. One is the NetScaler that I'm deploying today. Another is the F5. And of course, they support their own NSX load balancer. Speaking from experience, if you are going to use any load balancer other than those and contact support, and there's an issue between some sort of connectivity between, say, vCenter and your PSCs, that is basically where support will end. So please keep that in mind when you're going on this journey of deploying this entire infrastructure to make sure the components are supportable by VMware. So we're going to go ahead. This is the management IP address that we need to enter here. I actually have this in a window console because for some reason the remote console connection was flaking out. This is the information I just entered, and it's asking me if I want to save. So I say yes. It's going to go through doing some certificate stuff. It's going to start some services, and then hopefully we're good to go. I will speed up the video here to get through this in a timely manner. All right, so the appliance is now booted. So we need to navigate to the IP address of the management side of the house, and I actually created a DNS entry, so I'm just gonna type that in here. The default login is nsroot. Obviously you're going to want to change that at some point. So the first thing that we need to do is this subnet IP address that I had mentioned earlier. Again, this is the IP address that's going to make the communication work, basically. This one doesn't really need a DNS entry for it. It's just an IP address. Now we're going to enter some host information. And I guess select a time zone. I just selected one at random. It's a lab, so, and then click done. Now it's going to go ahead and reboot again, now that all of that is set. So I'm going to click yes. I'm going to flip over here and watch it reboot. I will speed up the video to get through this, and I will catch you on the other side. All right, looks like the appliance is back up. This screen is now available, and we're going to log back in. Now, as you can see here, that initial wizard is gone, so it's happy. I did mention this HA status up here. You can configure these VPXs in an HA environment. So it looks like Citrix just renamed it Citrix ADC VPX. So it looks like they still have the VPX name in there. So first we're going to go to configure, which we're already there. And then traffic management, load balancing, and servers. This is where we're going to define what servers need load balancing. And since we're in the second site, it's going to be the PSCL3 node. We don't need to fill out any of this stuff down here. We're going to click create. All right, let's add the second one. And create. All right, we've got our two servers that we're going to load balance here. So to make this whole thing transition smoothly, there are a few ports that we need to balance the load with. Those are going to be 389, 443, 636, 212, or 2012 rather, 2014, and 2020. I also add port 80. The reason I add port 80 is because when you go to the PSC's webpage, if you ever need to, then it will automatically redirect you to 443 anyway. So if you just type the name of your PSC, it first makes a connection on port 80. You would have to type in HTTPS first to get to 443. If you didn't, you would get a page cannot be displayed or timed out or something along those lines. So the documentation skips port 80, but I generally do add it. So we're going to click services, and this is where we're going to add our services. So we're going to click add. And these are very specific to each system. So this is going to be PSC03 on port 80, and we're going to do existing server PSC03. I'm going to, even though port 80 is HTTP, the VMware documentation does specify to use TCP, and I'm taking that from the 443 where that's HTTPS, but it, like I said, says to use TCP. So I'm going to say OK. Now, don't click done here or anything. Just click this arrow to say back. And the state of this should be up. If this is not up, it says down, then we have a configuration issue. Generally, it comes down to that subnet IP. It can't make a connection to the PSC and probe that port. So I'm going to repeat this a few times. So that is up as well. So I'm going to repeat this for all of those ports that I mentioned for both PSCs. I'm going to speed the video up just a tad just to get through this because it is repetitive. All right, so I have one PSC is done completely with the ports that are required. They're all up. Now I'm going to repeat the process for the second PSC. And we want to use existing server again. We just want to make sure we're swapping this one. And he's up, so it looks good. So I'm going to repeat the process on all of the remaining ports. I'll speed up the video just a smidge. All right, so all of these are now showing as up. So that tells me that I have connectivity from the NetScaler to my PSCs, both of my PSCs. So I'm going to click virtual servers here. I'm going to say add. This is for the PSC virtual server port 80. Same deal. And this IP address is actually the VIP. And remember, this needs a fully qualified domain name that we'll use later. Now, once I click OK here, if I have never used the load balancing service before, there's going to be a prompt here that pops up asking you if you want to start the service. Click yes when that pops up. Now, don't click back like we did before. Scroll down a little bit, and we want to go to this no load balancing virtual server service binding. Whew, mouthful. And we're going to click this greater than sign. And now we want to check both of the port 80s that are on each of the PSCs. Click select and bind. Now we can click back and it should both show up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually repeat this for each of the ports and bind them to both of the PSCs. I'll speed the video up just a little bit, but to conserve some time, it's just a repetitive action for each of the ports. So now that all of these are showing as up, I am good to go to move on to the next section, which is persistency groups. I'm going to click add here. I want to do it on source IP. This is fine. This is fine. This is not fine. So default is timeout is 2 seconds. This needs to be changed to 1440, 1,440 seconds. Now, if you did the math on that, that equates to 24 hours. So basically, what this load balancer is doing is it's going to attach to a PSC, and it's not going to let go for 24 hours. So that's why I loosely use the word balance, load balance, because it's not really load balancing. And this is the value that VMware says to put in here. It's not sending traffic to one PSC then the other. What it's doing is it stays on that one PSC, and if that PSC dies, there's an automatic failover to the other PSC. That's what the load balancer is affording you. However, if you don't want to have the cost of the load balancer, or maybe your load balancer isn't supported, what you can do is take your vCenter and attach it to a PSC directly. If that PSC ends up dying, then there are commands that you can enter to move him to connect to another PSC or the second PSC in your site. So just keep this in mind, that the load balancer is always going to be pointed to one PSC. As long as they don't go down, rebooted, etc., it will keep that persistence. So I'm going to click add here. Move all of those over, and then I'm going to click create. And there's my persistency group. This basically completes the setup within NetScaler. But now is the moment of truth. What I'm going to do now is open a window here. And I am going to go to the fully qualified domain name of that VIP. All right, so we're hitting the VIP right now, and we've got a web page. That means that traffic is flowing through the load balancer and then hitting one of those two PSCs. I hit advanced here. And as soon as I click this, I'm going to be forwarded or redirected to one of those two PSCs. Boom. I am forwarded to PSC 03. So this is telling me that the load balancer is successfully forwarding traffic to those PSCs. So we are done with the deployment of the load balancers. I hope you enjoyed watching this deployment, and thank you for listening.